Hello. There was a pair of twin sisters driving along a coastal road in Hawaii. During their trip, their vehicle suddenly lost control from a cliff over 60 meters high. The SUV crashed onto the rocks below just a short distance from the shoreline. Miraculously, the older sister survived while the younger sister was not so fortunate. Due to several suspicious circumstances surrounding the accident, the older sister was charged with murdering her twin. This is the story of the Hawaii Yoga twins. The main characters in this story are the twin sisters, the older sister Allison Dado and the younger sister Ann Dado. They were born in August 1978 in the state of New York. New York is located in the Northeast and is one of the most economically developed states, leading in finance, industry, arts, and more. About 242 miles from New York City lies a city called Utica, where the twins grew up. Besides the two of them, the family had an older sister, 3 years their senior. When the twins were 11, their mother passed away from an aneurysm. This was a huge shock for the two sisters. From that point on, they relied on each other to get through life. In both personality and appearance, the two were extremely similar, almost like mirror images of each other. They were almost inseparable, sharing a very close bond. Allison and Ann attended Notre Dame High School together. During their school years, both joined the cheerleading team and practiced daily. It was also during this time that they developed a love for yoga. By the age of 30, they had opened a yoga studio together. Unexpectedly, the business flourished, and everything seemed to go smoothly. However, over time, they neglected management, and the yoga studio gradually became unprofitable, even bleak. This caused the sisters to become constantly anxious and often blame each other, which strained their relationship. They argued over minor issues 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes becoming physically aggressive. However, they were still siblings. After each quarrel, they reconciled, agreed to temporarily set aside work problems, and went to Hawaii together for a vacation. But shortly after arriving, a strange incident occurred. What happened that day between the sisters? What secrets did they hold? Let's rewind to May 29, 2016. That day was a Sunday. A Ford Explorer SUV was driving along a coastal road on the island of Maui, Hawaii. The driver was Allison, and the passenger seat was occupied by Ann. At the time, they were driving around the island enjoying the scenery. Maui is the second largest island in the Hawaiian archipelago, covering 2.73 square miles. The island has a pleasant climate and is a famous tourist destination. Known for its many beautiful valleys, it is sometimes called the Valley Isle. Allison and Ann were driving along the Hana Highway, a 105-kilometer-long road built along steep cliffs. While driving on the Hana Highway, travelers can admire spectacular views, waterfalls on one side and the ocean on the other. You can enjoy the magnificent scenery of mountains and sea, bringing a sense of peace and relaxation. It is one of the most beautiful roads in the United States. However, despite the beautiful scenery, the Hana Highway is narrow and winding. Sometimes it is necessary to reduce speed below 9.3 km/h to drive safely. Otherwise, it is very dangerous. The road is old with rough patches that cause the vehicle to shake continuously. Although the surroundings are beautiful, there are hidden dangers. Initially, the sisters were in a good mood, but for some unknown reason, they began to argue. A fight broke out in the car. Ann in the passenger seat grabbed Allison by the hair, and Allison pushed her away. At that moment, the SUV was still traveling at high speed. Suddenly, the vehicle swerved to the left, hit the roadside guardrail, and plunged down a 197-feet cliff. The SUV tumbled multiple times before crashing onto the coastal rocks and coming to a stop. Because many vehicles were passing on the Hana Highway, numerous witnesses saw the SUV fall down the cliff. They saw movement inside the vehicle and immediately called the police. Upon receiving the report, police and rescue personnel quickly arrived at the scene. They airlifted the injured to the hospital. Afterwards, the police began investigating the incident. The SUV fell from a 197-feet cliff, the impact so severe that the vehicle was heavily deformed. Allison was taken to the hospital for examination. Her ribs and arm were broken, but she could still walk on her own. For someone falling from such a height, surviving was incredibly fortunate. Allison's life was not in danger, but her sister Ann was not as lucky. She died at the scene. Before the accident, a witness driving behind the SUV saw the twins arguing violently and pulling each other's hair through the windshield. The witness was shocked by the scene. In reality, driving on Hana Road requires full attention because the road is narrow and even a small mistake can be dangerous. Yet the SUV carrying the twins not only drove at high speed, but also had them fighting inside, sending chills down anyone's spine. The witness then saw the SUV plummet straight down the cliff. Police found several long blonde hairs in Anne's hand, indicating that before the fall, Anne had indeed grabbed Allison's hair with force. Otherwise, the strands would not have been pulled from her scalp. Police initially concluded the accident occurred because the two were fighting, causing the car to lose control and fall off the cliff. Based on the marks on the road, police speculated that the car had swerved sharply to the left. The roadside barrier made of earth was hit by the car, sending it over the cliff. Since Allison was in the driver's seat, the airbag deployed in time to protect her before hitting the windshield. Anne, in the passenger seat, hit her head on the car roof during the rollover and was thrown out, resulting in tragedy. Based on acceleration and deceleration data from the car's black box combined with analysis of the airbag control module, police saw that the car had not slowed down. In other words, Allison did not brake before plunging off the cliff. The vehicle went down at very high speed. Police arranged for technicians to simulate the accident. Interestingly, after falling from the cliff, the car landed on a rocky outcrop by the coast surrounded by water. If the car had fallen just slightly off, it would have landed in the ocean, making survival for Allison unlikely. This raised suspicion about whether Allison had intentionally aimed for that spot. Experts reconstructing the scene noted that while driving, one cannot see if the cliff below is rock or water until right at the edge, so the chance of deliberately choosing the exact position was low. Although Allison might not have intentionally aimed for the spot, the possibility that she deliberately drove off the cliff and coincidentally landed on a rocky outcrop could not be ruled out. Allison's actions made police uneasy. When officers arrived at the scene on Maui, the first thing Allison said was, "Why is everyone here?" Moreover, initially, she did not want to answer police questions. She did not ask how Anne was. While talking, Allison smelled strongly of alcohol. Police then tested her blood alcohol level, which turned out to be 3 times the legal limit for driving locally. At the hospital, officers informed Allison that her sister Anne had died. Yet Allison remained indifferent, showing no signs of grief. The police quickly identified Allison's boyfriend named Dickerson as the owner of the SUV involved in the accident. Not long after Dickerson appeared at the hospital. At that moment, something strange happened upon seeing Dickerson. Allison said, "Shut up, you've said too much in front of the police already." Furthermore, when the father of the 2 sisters arrived at the hospital, he expressed his disappointment, saying that it should have been Allison who died. Next, the police investigated the identities and backgrounds of the 2 sisters. They discovered that 8 years earlier, in 2008, the sisters had opened a yoga studio called Twin Power Yoga in Pigeon, Southeast Florida. Pigeon is a famous coastal resort in the state, facing the sea with world-class beaches attracting many tourists during the summer. The hotels there were fully booked. Pigeon was not only a tourist destination, but also an area for the wealthy. Many affluent people bought seaside villas there. The sisters' yoga studio was located in this area. Initially, the business thrived, earning them a substantial income. Allison even purchased a Porsche. Over time, their yoga studio gained fame. In 2011, after 3 years of running the studio, the sisters were invited to participate in a reality TV show. The show's producers suggested they rent a bigger, more luxurious location for the yoga studio, promising that after the move, they would continue to be featured on TV to enhance their reputation. After careful consideration, the sisters agreed and relocated. However, this decision increased their expenses significantly, with rent alone being much higher. However, the show producers did not fulfill their promise and did not feature them on television. After relocating, the business did not meet expectations, and the studio's income was insufficient to cover the monthly rent, leading to continuous losses. Helpless, the sisters decided to close the studio in 2014. By that time, they had accumulated about $100,000 in debt. Notably, the sisters did not inform their employees in advance about the closure and owed them several months' wages. Some clients had purchased memberships, but were not refunded. The sisters disappeared, causing public outrage. Many left negative reviews online, which gradually spread, tarnishing the reputation of Twin Power Yoga in the local yoga community. After closing the studio, the sisters moved from Florida to Park City, Utah. Their names had appeared multiple times in negative online reviews. Due to this criticism affecting their reputation, Allison changed her name to Alexandria Duval, and Anne changed hers to Anastasia Duval. They opened a new yoga studio in Park City. However, it was not long before their real identities were discovered. A simple online search revealed their dark past. Park City is a small town where rumors spread quickly. Soon the local yoga community knew about the sisters' history in Florida. The new studio's business declined, the sisters fell into debt again and had to close. They began drowning their sorrows in alcohol together. On one occasion after drinking, they got into a fight in a restaurant. When the police arrived, they were still pulling each other's hair. At that time, their car also ended up in a small ditch, showing that they had previously encountered similar situations, leading to loss of control while driving. In March 2014, Allison was arrested for driving under the influence, engaging in a fight while driving and fleeing the scene of an accident. Afterwards, Anne threatened the police officer who arrested Allison, saying, "I will kill you." She even physically attacked the officer. Ultimately, Allison went to jail for assaulting and threatening the police. In December 2015, the two sisters moved to Hawaii. They used fake names to ask for cash from staff at a homeless shelter, while in reality, they were living in a luxurious spa resort and were not in need. No one knew why they did this. In 2016, the sisters rented a local house and each found a boyfriend. Allison dated Dickerson while Anne was involved with a man named Bailey. All four lived together in the spacious rental. Bailey, Anne's boyfriend, said the sisters often argued at home, sometimes even physically fighting, and their fights looked very practiced. Shortly before the accident, Anne and Bailey planned a camping trip. They intentionally did not tell Allison, wanting a romantic getaway for just the two of them. During that time, Bailey monitored the sisters to help them avoid alcohol, so they did not bring any for the trip. Anne and Bailey went to Cotto's supermarket to buy some necessities. However, at checkout, they realized they had accidentally brought Allison's card, so they went back to get their own. When they returned home, they saw Allison. Learning about the camping plan, Allison said she wanted to join. This upset Anne, and the sisters argued on the way to the campsite. Upon arrival, the sisters still seemed restless. Later, Bailey stayed alone at the campsite while the sisters drove off. When they returned, they appeared cheerful and told Bailey they had met a girl hitchhiking who also had a twin sister, and they had a pleasant conversation. Not long after, Bailey discovered that Anne and Allison had been drinking alcohol. At that time, Bailey was trying to help them quit drinking, but the sisters broke their promise. This made Bailey extremely angry. He then left the campsite, saying he wanted to be alone to calm down. Not long after, Anne and Allison brought alcohol and drove the SUV away. That was the last time Bailey saw the two sisters. According to Bailey, a week before the incident, Allison told him, "I want to kill her," referring to Anne. Allison also told Anne, "We will leave this planet on the 30th. From that point, Anne's behavior became very strange. It seemed something serious was tormenting her. Anne appeared anxious with her hands shaking violently. Anne had always been very confident and had never had her hands shake like that. When Bailey asked what had happened, she acted irritable and said nothing. This led people to speculate whether Allison intentionally drove off the cliff, or if she had planned to commit suicide with her twin sister beforehand. After the accident, another strange thing happened. When Allison returned home, she asked Bailey, Anne's boyfriend, to wash her hair. After bathing, Allison put on Anne's clothes, sat next to Bailey, and rested her head on his shoulder. Bailey said that seeing her in Anne's clothes made him very uncomfortable because Anne had worn that dress just a few days before. Allison refused to discuss any details of the case with Bailey. After obtaining some important statements, the police believed Allison was involved in the incident and prepared to arrest her. However, at that time, Allison had fled. Knowing that the police wanted to arrest her, she booked a flight to leave Hawaii. On June 5th, 5 days after the accident, the police received a report and went to Maui Airport. The flight Allison had booked was canceled due to a problem, so Allison went to a hotel near the airport. The police raided the hotel and arrested her. 8 days after the incident, the first hearing took place in court. The prosecutor charged Allison with second-degree murder. Second-degree murder refers to intentional killing without premeditation. At the hearing, Allison's hand was still bandaged. The judge ruled that there was not enough evidence to support the charge, so the second-degree murder charge against Allison was dismissed. After being released, Allison returned to New York. However, she was arrested again for drunk driving and not wearing a seatbelt. Her blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit locally. After being arrested, Allison refused to disclose her whereabouts, and also refused to provide fingerprints and photographs. In October 2016, 5 months after the incident, prosecutors gathered more evidence and continued to prosecute Allison. Here it is necessary to mention the concept of a grand jury. The jury we usually refer to as the petite jury. The grand jury differs from the petite jury. The grand jury often appears in preliminary hearings to decide whether to indict, while the petite jury appears during trials to determine guilt or innocence. At the preliminary hearing, the grand jury found sufficient evidence to prosecute. On November 11th, Allison was arrested in Amherst, New York, and then transferred to Hawaii. On October 29th, 2018, the official trial began. Allison was charged with second-degree murder. If convicted, she would face a sentence of over 20 years to life imprisonment. At the trial, multiple prosecution witnesses testified one by one. Some stated that they heard the 2 women in the SUV arguing violently. Both were extremely angry. They saw the woman in the passenger seat grabbing the hair of the driver. Another witness said she heard the engine roar as the SUV accelerated and saw the 2 women fighting inside the vehicle. The passenger was grabbing the driver's hair. Then the vehicle suddenly veered left and plunged off the cliff. Another witness, Kaleo Aikoi, reported hearing the driver scream at the passenger call a psychiatrist. "We need a psychiatrist immediately." A key prosecution witness was Keith Weiss Ann's ex-boyfriend, who had dated her for over 6 months and knew both sisters. Weiss testified that the sisters often argued and were jealous of each other. Once he received a call from Ann. Ann said, "Come here quickly, I'm about to kill her." She then hit Allison on the head with the phone. When Weiss arrived at their home, he saw broken glass, scattered cups, and blood everywhere. Allison's face was injured and the bedroom door was damaged. Yet the sisters acted as if nothing had happened, sitting together on the sofa. Whenever Weiss asked, "Are you okay?" both replied, "We're fine, we're watching a movie." They seemed to have completely forgotten the harsh words exchanged over the phone just minutes earlier. On another occasion, when Weiss went shopping with the sisters, Ann suddenly struck Allison on the back of the head with a stick, triggering another intense argument. Weiss stated that when sober they were good people, but once they drank they seemed like different individuals. Bailey, Ann's later boyfriend, noted that Allison seemed somewhat jealous of Ann, as Ann always had a boyfriend while Allison remained on the sidelines. At court, Bailey testified that he had only known Ann for 35 days before the incident. At that time, he was living in his camper van. Later, Ann invited Bailey to live with the 2 sisters, giving him a stable place to stay. However, some argued that Bailey had not been with the sisters long enough, so his testimony might be unreliable. After deliberation, the court declared that Allison was not guilty of second-degree murder. Allison's lawyer, Bernie Bervar, told reporters that this was an extremely difficult challenge for Allison. "You can't imagine the feeling of losing your twin sister in such a tragic accident, and then being accused of intentionally killing her. Allison is innocent." However, Maui prosecutor John Kim expressed disappointment. There was clearly enough evidence to show at least some wrongdoing by Allison. Although the case had concluded, public speculation continued. Some suggested that the sisters might have had psychological issues leading to impulsive behavior, frequent arguments, and fights in public. On the day of the incident, after a quarrel, Allison could not control her anger, combined with previous suicidal thoughts with her sister, which may have caused her to drive off the cliff. The sisters had previously met a spiritual teacher named Leslie. Leslie described Allison as having a controlling personality, while Anne was calmer, rational, and composed. Therefore, no one knew why the sisters' personalities suddenly changed, and whether this was a direct or indirect cause of the tragedy. Others believe that Allison may have intentionally caused the accident out of jealousy toward Anne. This could also explain why Allison showed no reaction to Anne's death, and even approached Bailey afterward. Bailey noted that the sisters had previously planned a business venture in Hawaii without including Allison, since the sisters had always been inseparable and did everything together. Allison may have realized Anne's intention to leave her out, lost control of her anger, and developed malicious thoughts. Some also believe that the cause was alcohol addiction. At the time of the incident, Allison was intoxicated, and alcohol abuse may have caused her to lose control while driving, leading to the tragedy. When they lived in Florida, a neighbor said they were good people. I don't know what happened to them later, but I know they were heavy drinkers. This indicates that alcohol truly had a significant impact on their lives. Other opinions suggested that it was purely an accident. The direct cause was Anne grabbing Allison's hair, which caused Allison to lose control, not intentional action. Later, Allison participated in a television program and shared that she felt deeply sorrowful and conflicted after those events. However, ultimately, Allison was the one who drove the vehicle off the cliff. So in that moment, what was her true intention? Other opinions suggested that it was purely an accident. The direct cause was Anne grabbing Allison's hair, which caused Allison to lose control, not intentional action. Later, Allison participated in a television program and shared that she felt deeply